Hey, welcome in you Gooshbagz. This is Jason. Welcome back to a spooktacular episode of the Gooshbagz League podcast. This is week 7 now. We had some big news in the NFL. There were a lot of injuries this week, unfortunately. There were a bunch of them. 2 people went on IR, 2 big players went on IR. Kerryon Johnson had a knee injury, and he just had surgery, and he's on the IR, and he's basically out for the rest of the year. And also, Josh Gordon today just got put onto the IR. He was on my team, so I dropped him and picked up Kenny Stills, who is replacing a Will Fuller, who had a rather significant hamstring injury this week. So that's another addition to not the IR, but the injury report. Adam Thielen also had a hamstring injury. That one's more, not as major as Will Fuller's, but the Minnesota Vikings play on Thursday, so he has a higher chance of missing that game since it's a quick turnaround from Sunday. Matt Ryan also got a sprained ankle this week. He may or may not be playing. As far as I know right now, they don't know, but he may or may not be playing. The Falcons might have to play on Sunday with Matt Schaub at the helm. So, who knows? This was kind of an upside-down week this week for fantasy. Most of the studs disappointed, and a lot of the average players or like unknowns had big weeks this week. So like Marvin Jones, who you don't. Although this is an interesting fact, Marvin Jones, he did have. I'm going to talk about this a little later, but he had 4 touchdowns, and it is the second time in his career where he's had 4 receiving touchdowns in a game, and that joins only a select few people with 4 receiving touchdowns in a game. I don't know those people off the top of my head, so let me look them up quick. Let us see. Yeah, I don't know. I tried doing a quick Google search, but it didn't come up immediately, so I'm not going to spend any more time on it because it doesn't really matter. Chase Edmonds also had a huge day, and Latavius Murray. Man, some last-second starts potentially, or in the case of Chase Edmonds, he wasn't even on any team because David Johnson was supposed to play today or this week, so that was unfortunate. So the top scorer in this league this week, man, Adam has come a long way from being 0-5 to coming back, winning 2 in a row, and this week he put up 156.2 points. He's on a roll now. He's got 2 in a row, and he has got a monster team, but they were all injured until now, so now he's going to be reaping the benefits. Maybe he'll fight his way to a playoff berth, but it wouldn't be out of the question for him to win the rest of his games this year. So I'm not saying it's going to happen, and it's probably more likely than not that he won't, but it's a possibility. So moving on to the studs of the week this week at the quarterback position. Quarterback 1 was Aaron Rodgers with 43.8 fantasy points. He had 429 passing yards, 5 passing touchdowns. He also had 2 rushes for 6 yards and a touchdown. Now that is the massive game that we were looking for from Aaron Rodgers all year. And he did this not without all of his receiving weapons, but just Devontae Adams was out. We thought going into it that maybe MVS or Geronimo Allison would be out this week, but they played. They did okay. MVS had 2 catches for 133 yards and a touchdown, so that was good. And but overall, it doesn't really matter. If you have above average wide receivers on the field, or even average wide receivers on the field, Aaron Rodgers can do a lot with those players. So quarterback number 2 this week was Kirk Cousins. He had 29.2 fantasy points. He put up 337 passing yards and 4 touchdowns. That's a good couple weeks in a row here. Minnesota's offense is getting into a rhythm, And I think they're playing Washington this week, so that gives him another opportunity to put up another big game, which would be huge. But also, unfortunately, Brandon Cook's Kittlecorn picked him up, so he's playing against me this week. So hopefully that's a big running game. I think it will be, actually. Not even, like, barring the fact that Kirk Cousins is playing against me, I do believe that they're just going to run the ball with Dalvin Cook all game this week. So I hope that's the case. We'll see how it goes, but Kirk Cousins has been a great quarterback the last 2 or 3 weeks. And then Matt Stafford was number 3. He was on the other side of the ball in that shootout with Kirk Cousins. He had 28.6 fantasy points, and he had 364 passing yards and 4 touchdowns as well. So they both put up fantastic games. And it was a surprising shootout in Minnesota. I thought maybe Minnesota would do a little bit better in shutting down the Detroit offense, but didn't happen that way. The stud running backs this week. Chase Edmonds was running back 1 this week with 34 fantasy points. He had 27 rushes for 126 yards and 3 touchdowns. And in the process, he disappointed all David Johnson owners this week because DJ was active, and he not only was he active, he started the game. He got 1 carry and was like, nah, bro, and he dipped out of that game. And Chase Edmonds took over and had himself a day. So he also got picked up by Brandon Cook's Kittlecorn. I don't know how that happened. I think he bid, $11? Recent activity. Yeah, he gave, it was only $6, but nobody else was willing to bid more than that. So Chase Edmonds goes to Brandon Cook's Kittlecorn, who is going to put up a massive week against me. So that's almost a guarantee. Latavius Murray, as I mentioned before, he was the number 2 running back this week. He had 29.5 fantasy points. He had 27 rushes as well, same as Chase Edmonds. He went for 119 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. He also had 5 receptions for 31 yards. This was definitely the week of the fill-in running backs. So if you had a fill-in running back, chances are he did pretty well. And running back number 3 on the week was Dalvin Cook, continuing his domination this year. He had 27.4 fantasy points. He rushed 25 times for 142 yards and 2 touchdowns. So not only did Kirk Cousins throw the ball for 4 touchdowns, Dalvin Cook also had 2 rushing touchdowns. So that was a huge game all around for the Minnesota team. On the wide receiving side of the onto the wide receivers. Marvin Jones was the wide receiver 1 this week with 38.3 fantasy points. He had 10 catches for 93 yards and 4 touchdowns. He was on a roll this week. Also, this is a very interesting statistic. So Marshawn Lattimore is the cornerback who covered him for most of this game. He's on Minnesota. He covered him for 2 of his touchdowns this week. Marshawn Lattimore has given up 7 touchdowns total in the last 3 years, and 4 of them have been to Marvin Jones. So Marvin Jones just has Marshawn Lattimore's number. While Marshawn Lattimore is shutting down the rest of the league, Marvin Jones is just ripping him apart. The wide receiver number 2 for the week was Zach Pascal with 25.6 fantasy points. He had 6 catches for 106 yards and 2 touchdowns. Now, the problem with Zach Pascal is that you don't know when he's going to have a big game, and I'm pretty sure nobody picked him up this week because besides T.Y. Hilton, I don't know if there's another consistent wide receiver in this offense. So, he could have a big game. Eric Ebron could have a big game. Or I don't even know all the wide receivers in Indianapolis, but Zach Pascal is not he just had a big week. It was not quite a Will Fuller type of week, but that's kind of the relevance he's going back to for the rest of the year, I think. And finally, the wide receiver number 3 on this week was DeAndre Hopkins. He finally got his big points. He had 21.1 fantasy points. He had 9 catches for 106 yards and 1 touchdown. Ever since week 1, we've been waiting on another good game from him, and he finally delivered. He finally turned. He had a over 20% target share, and it's about time he put in a touchdown and some big yards. So good for him. He should keep going, keep rolling with that. On to the tight end position. Darren Waller, tight end 1 this week with 28.1 fantasy points. He had 7 catches for 126 yards and 2 touchdowns. 2! That was after he has had no touchdowns for the beginning of this year. I was unfortunate enough to play against him when he got his first touchdowns of the year. He's a solid tight end, and I think he has the potential to be the tight end number 1 at the end of the year. Speaking of, going back to the Indianapolis Colts game, Eric Ebron had 15 fantasy points this week. He's the tight end 2 on the week. He had 44 catches for 70 yards and 1 touchdown. And although he did have 70 yards this game, to be honest, he's really only relevant when he gets a touchdown. So he's basically the epitome of touchdown or bust. So if you're lucky to play him on a week that he has a touchdown, then you're happy. If you don't play him when he gets a touchdown, then you're not. So it's just kind of it's really rolling the dice, putting your money down on red or black each week. So tight end number 3 this week, speaking of touchdown or bust, Jimmy Graham. He had 14.5 fantasy points. He had 4 catches for 65 yards and 1 touchdown. He has been getting looks for the past 4 weeks when Devontae Adams was out, and finally he got a touchdown out of it. But previously he hasn't been doing a lot with that sort of with that sort of work. So it was good to see him get a score this week. On to the duds of the week, the fantasy duds. In the quarterback position, dud number 1. I just had to bring this up even though nobody started him this week. Sam Darnold, he be seeing ghosts. Ooh. He had negative 6.7 fantasy points this week. Negative 6.7. That is the 9th worst of all time. I looked up that list. John Elway is actually on that list once. Guess who else is on that list? Sexy Rexy. Rex Grossman is on that list not once, but twice. He's had negative games in like the negative 6 to 9 region. So he had Sam Darnold had 86 passing yards with 4 interceptions and 1 lost fumble. He claimed to be seeing ghosts in the New England secondary. I understand. It's a scary defense. If I were to play against them, I'd probably be seeing ghosts too. But I actually did watch a video this morning of Brett Favre talking about how seeing ghosts is actually a term in the NFL, and like rookie quarterbacks specifically, where he's not a rookie anymore, but the transition between like college and the NFL is like pretty insane. So you get like jumpy as a quarterback. You see blitzes where there aren't any, like you're just kind of twitchy all over the place. You're like your brain is in hyperactive mode. So that's just something that you lose as you get more comfortable in the league, and stop being so jumpy about seeing blitzes where there aren't, seeing defenders where they aren't. So you're less jumpy and a little more comfortable in the pocket. And I'm sure that's where he'll get to be. He's a really good quarterback, but he's having a tough time because his first game back from injury is against the New England Patriots. So that's no fun. Or I guess it was his second game back. But either way, not so fun. Another dud this week that was started was Matt Ryan. He had 2.6 fantasy points. Now, he got injured, but it was super late in the game. So, he had plenty of opportunity to put up fantasy points this week, but he just didn't. He had 159 passing yards with an interception and a fumble. Not his best game, and now he's got a high ankle sprain. So, like I said, I don't know if he's going to be playing this week, but Matt Ryan, because their defense is so bad, he basically has to throw the ball all the time. So if he's out there, you're playing him. Dud number 3 this week was Pat Mahomes. Now, he also got hurt, but he wasn't having a fantastic day either. He dislocated his knee, and he's going to be out for potentially like 3 to 5 weeks, I think they were saying. And everybody wants to beat that timeline, but to be honest, with this sort of injury, and Matt Moore is a decent enough backup, I think he'll do okay in his absence. I wouldn't rush him back, especially if you're trying to make a playoff push, so you just have a higher chance of re-injuring it. He had 7.2 fantasy points, so he didn't make anybody happy on their fantasy team this week. Kyler Murray only had 7 fantasy points. He didn't really have to do much this week because Chase Edmonds just took over that game. So Kyler Murray, they won the game, and it just turned out that was the game script. Was they just ran the ball the whole time. So he didn't do anything. He didn't need to do anything. And then Carson Wentz had 6.8 fantasy points, so he did not make anybody happy. There were a lot of bad quarterback games this week, and that's why they were pretty low-scoring games. So the only team that scored a significant number of points was Adams, and that was because he had Aaron Rodgers on his team. So he actually had a quarterback who put up points, and wow, he actually scored points this week. So in the running back position, David Johnson had 0.2 points. He literally played all of 3 snaps. Apparently they came out afterwards and said, Cliff Kingsbury came out afterwards and said, yeah, he was only supposed to be used in emergencies. Unfortunately, they didn't tell us that before the game. They told us that after the game, so didn't have an opportunity to bench David Johnson. Once we saw he was active, everybody's going to be starting him. So Devonta Freeman also had a rough game this week. I think in general the Falcons had a tough day. He only had 3.5 fantasy points. He had 7 rushes for 19 yards. He also had 2 catches for 6 yards, so putting up some big numbers in the passing game. He got ejected also in this game for punching a dude, so there's that. I don't think he's going to be suspended, but, he was out for that game, or part of that game. Running back number 3 on the bust list was Phillip Lindsay, who had 3.7 fantasy points. He had 11 rushes for 36 yards, and this is just kind of what you get from Phillip Lindsay. I mention this every week because he's either a boom or a bust. He's either a stud or a dud every week because, he puts up like a high 20s game, and then he'll put up like a 4 game. So that's what we got this week. So that's just what you're going to get. In the wide receiver category, Larry Fitzgerald had 1.7 fantasy points. He had 1 catch for 12 yards, and there was almost no passing game in the Cardinals game this week, so he should bounce back in the coming weeks. Kenny Golladay had 2.6 fantasy points. He only had 1 catch for 21 yards. Apparently Marvin Jones was just open the whole game, so, Matt Stafford didn't feel like throwing to anybody else. So, whatever, that's up to him, I guess. Then Alshon Jeffrey had 4.8 fantasy points. He only had 2 catches for 38 yards. And the Eagles' offense just kind of had an off week this week. So, Alshon's been a target hog. He'll be fine going forward. At the tight end position, Evan Engram had 1.1 fantasy point. He had 1 catch for 6 yards. So, he went out in the middle of the game and then came back from an injury. I don't know exactly what that was, but it was really unfortunate because he's been a very solid tight end this whole year, and I don't know, maybe it was just a down game. I don't know what happened to Evan Engram this year or this week. He just didn't get the looks. Luke Wilson was started this week. Neal decided to start him. He goosed. He wasn't used at all in this game. So the attempt to replace Will Disley, at least Luke Wilson did not get those looks from Russell Wilson. I'm pretty sure a lot of those looks went to Jaron Brown. He's been kind of the Will Disley replacement, but he's a wide receiver, so you can't put him in your tight end position, unfortunately. And then Zach Ertz just hasn't looked the same this year. He's not getting the volume that he's used to. He's hasn't gotten any too many touchdowns. I think he's got 1 touchdown. He only had 2 catches for 38 yards in this game, so it's kind of scary seeing him get a lost work. He was one of the most consistent tight ends you could find in the game. So, all right, on to the matchup reactions. Now, for the beginning of this matchup reaction segment, I have a very special segment for you guys. I happened to catch up with my opponent for this week, Benaiah Sombke, and we talked it out over Skype a couple days ago, and I'm going to play that back for you guys. So, without further ado, here is the Week 7 champion, not champion, but he won against me, and here he is to talk all about it. It's me and Benaiah Sombke.
So, we'll go back to last week. How did you feel going into this weekend's matchup?
Well, I mean, I saw that I was projected to beat you for a while. I'm like, oh gosh, I can beat this kid, maybe climb to 3-4.
Yeah.
Climb straight my way back. But then I saw that you had Disley out, so I'm like, oh, okay, well he's gonna have to replace Disley.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, I'll take a look at the free agents.
Yeah.
I'll try to.
What the heck? Is that what you did? You snuck underneath me to grab Gerald Everett?
Yeah, I was trying to grab Gerald Everett and maybe Delaney Walker to like kind of try to screw you.
Yeah.
I was really paranoid. Like I was like.
That's some next level strats right there.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I think I was just kind of high. That's all.
No, that was good. Man, I was pissed off the next day. I saw you drop Gerald Everett, and then the next I figured on waivers I put in like a $0 bid because I didn't think anybody else would
Oh shit! It happened. You did do it.
Yeah, I did.
Wow.
I tried to get Gerald Everett, and you stole him from me.
Okay, then I guess it worked. I guess my kind of stoner strategy straight up worked.
Yeah.
Except you just traded for Kittle.
Then I had to. Then I had to trade. Well, I mean, he didn't do so hot. I would have been better off with Gerald Everett, but.
Well, I think he'll be eventually better off.
He will be. I was just hoping this week would be good. Instead, he played in a monsoon, so he didn't do anything.
Yeah.
Did you see that?
See, I didn't see any of that game. I had Red Zone on, and I think it might have cut to that game never. Yeah. Like 0 times.
Right. Well, there were only 3 field goals in that game, and that was it. So, they literally played in a monsoon. There was like nobody relevant in that game.
Yeah, I think that was the game that took like 2 hours and 25 minutes or something crazy like that, right?
Yeah, because they were just running the ball the whole time. So
the caveman football.
Oh yeah. But I was feeling, even though I was projected to lose, I was feeling particularly excited about this weekend because I crew Kyler Murray playing against the Giants. I had Dalvin Cook against Detroit. Mm-hmm. I had Chris Carson against Baltimore, who actually they've been awful against the run. Mm-hmm. Until they got Brandon Williams back this week. That was the problem, I think.
Who's Williams? Is he a lineman or what?
Yeah, he's a lineman for the Ravens.
Yeah, I should know this, me being an AFC North guy.
Yeah, he's I think one of the defensive tackles. So he's a big run stuffer. They're one big run stuffer, I guess. Mm-hmm. And so like the running splits with him in and with him out are like insane. Like those three or 4 games they've had the past 3 weeks, mm-hmm. Where the running backs went off on them. Like Nick Chubb had a huge game. I don't know, but it was just awful.
Well, I mean, I guess that's kind of why you pay those big guys inside, right?
Yeah, it is. So.
Also, I heard something from. I mean, this isn't like fantasy related or anything, but like my one friend thinks that. Well, yeah, you got to pay the huge guys more money just because there's fewer enormous, huge, monstrous, giant dudes in existence, just kind of as a baseline.
Just because, yeah.
Yeah, so they're just kind of rare.
Yeah, you build your defense around them. But Yeah, and then I was so stoked because John Brown was playing against Miami. Michael Gallup was against Philadelphia. Like these are all easy
Hmm.
matchups. Like they've all had one wide receiver go off on them for like 30 points a week.
Right.
And I was hoping Amari Cooper was going to be out, but he ended up playing and he had the big game for Dallas. But
Yeah, I'm just
yeah,
glad that I only got to see John Brown do his like epileptic squirrel dance one time. Like I hate
yeah,
that.
you don't like John Brown?
Don't like the dance. I mean,
Yeah,
I'll root for Buffalo whenever I can, but
right.
just I don't want to see the dance.
Yeah. So I was optimistic going into this week, even though I was projected to lose. I was like, "There's no way I'm scoring under 130 this week," and you know how that ended up. So,
Yeah. Well, I
so
mean, it kind of gets me wondering, like, okay, what is the actual? I mean, okay, so if you're projected like 115,
yeah,
what does it actually mean? I'm sure that means that you can score anywhere between like, like 25 points in either direction, right?
right, yeah. I mean, yeah, it's like the average. I don't know how ESPN does it. I think Mike Clay does all the projections for ESPN. I don't know if you know who Mike Clay is,
I
but
don't.
he's like I've listened to like their fantasy podcast that they come out with, and he's on there sometimes, and he's like this super nerdy white guy who just like he's like all into the stats, and so he's doing all this statistical analysis, and I think he comes up with the projections every week. But I don't know if he does all of them because that'd be a hell of a job. But um,
I'm sure he has a whole
algorithm
team
or
or
something.
whatever. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, or a team. Yeah, he probably has a team too.
Well, yeah. I mean, his monkeys are working the algorithm. That's
Yeah,
probably how it's working.
yeah, exactly. So I don't know, but I was really disappointed with how my team showed up this week.
Hmm.
And Darren Waller just beat me down.
See, Waller is like such a gift. I mean,
He is.
I watched Hard Knocks,
Hmm.
and Waller was featured in
Yeah,
that pretty heavily. They gave him a lot of screen time, and
yeah,
they were saying, they even mentioned like, um, they asked the players like, who do you think is going to be the underdog breakout player, and they're all like, yeah, Waller.
yeah. I heard that too. And I don't. Did you end up? You drafted him, right?
Didn't draft him. I
You
think I
didn't? Oh
just
man,
picked him up someday.
I made the mistake because I grabbed him in the last round of like two or three of my drafts, and I don't know why I didn't grab him in this one, but it's really unfortunate because yeah, I heard the same stuff that you did, but I wasn't positive
Hmm.
that he was definitely going to break out, but you snagged him and I'm very jealous.
Well, see, I think the thing is, it's like, well, Antonio Brown's gone. I don't know who they're gonna throw the ball to.
Exactly. Yeah, AB was gone and then yeah, Tyrell Williams got hurt, so he hasn't been and when he was in, he really wasn't that great. So,
Hmm.
yeah, Darren Waller. And that was his first week with a touchdown. He hadn't scored a touchdown yet. But yeah, he's been a target monster, and he's been
Hmm.
going nuts. So
Well, I mean, and as we know, targets are what's like most predictive of
oh yeah,
how they're gonna do, right? That's how it
yeah,
works.
it is. Yeah, touchdowns really aren't a sticky stat, so it's all
Yeah, they
about
come
the
and go.
volume. Yeah,
I mean, that's sort of people give Julio Jones grief for not catching as many touchdowns as people think he should or whatever. I mean,
right.
I don't think he has one. Does he have? He has a couple this year, right? Yeah, he has some this year.
Yeah, yeah. He ended up getting a few in the first couple of weeks, I think. Or
Yeah, just the first 3 games he's got. Yeah, he had 4 in the first 3 games.
yeah,
Nonsense, but
yeah,
I'm not worried.
yeah. I wouldn't be either. He went the whole first half of the season last year without a touchdown. So
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
you figure there's other people who can score on Atlanta anyway, right?
Yeah,
But
well, that's been the whole problem with like Calvin Ridley and and Mohamed Sanu. I mean,
mhm.
Mohamed Sanu has always been kind of a meh player, but yeah, like there's so many targets in Atlanta now. So Julio Jones, Austin Hooper, Calvin Ridley every once in a while. But
Mhm.
yeah, it's I mean, Julio Jones has been getting his though.
Yeah, I mean, the little bit of the Atlanta game that I saw was pretty much just like Matt Ryan getting slammed, and that was mostly it.
Yeah, well, he ended up getting hurt, so
Oh, I
yeah,
didn't
he
even know
was
that.
yeah, he was in like a walking boot at the end of the game.
Oh
It
gosh.
was
All
like
right. So, geez, okay.
yeah.
So Matt Ryan is in a boot. We got.
Well,
And I also have. I have Juju Smith-Schuster
yeah.
with Ben out.
Yep.
I don't know, man. I
And
don't know about
Melvin
this team.
Gordon's not as hot as you thought you were.
Well, here's the thing about Melvin Gordon. I remember reading about him. And yeah, I'll say things as if I remember. I probably only half remember things
Oh, I do that all
halfway
the
wrong.
time. Yeah.
But like Gordon, the big upside to him was just like volume. Like he was going to get the ball a
Yeah.
bunch, like 30 times a game.
Mhm.
You know, efficiency statistics.
Doesn't matter.
Who
Yeah.
cares? He's going to get the ball, and I don't know. It's not
Yeah.
totally that way. I
Yeah.
mean,
Well, he was in addition to running the ball like 20 times a game, he'd still get like 10 passes, like 10 targets a game, which is a huge boost to his game. And the touchdowns were going to come, you know.
yeah,
If he gets the ball that much, he's going to get touchdowns.
yeah.
So, but now Austin Eckler has kind of taken over all the passing game almost,
Mhm.
and that kind of sucks for Melvin Gordon. But
And
did you
the
see
other
he
running back
basically
Henry, he's not. I mean,
yeah.
he's just kind of having like weird offensive line problems, and
Yeah. I
just
mean,
watching a couple of that, it was, I don't know, a few plays from that. It's like, okay, well, looks like
yeah. Well, he's been running the ball pretty solid. Like he's been a consistent. He's gotten over 10 points in every game except last week. So, but he hasn't had like the monster games that you're looking for from Derrick
right.
Henry. He
No,
did have yeah, week
I
1 was
expect
good,
him to
but
get 200 yards a game from now on.
yeah,
So.
right? I mean, you expect all of your players to have at least 30 fantasy points each week. Like that's the minimum. So,
Yeah, that's right. Well, I mean, in confession time, like I kind of didn't totally get the memo about Melvin Gordon holding out at the beginning of the season. I did
so you
little
saw him
research.
in like the 5th or 6th round and were
Yeah, I'm
like,
like,
what's he still doing there?
I'm like, what the
You
hell is
grabbed
wrong
him.
with people? Like, and then I
For
saw
real, I
you
didn't
you
know
in the
that.
chat. You in the chat were like, ooh, bold pick. I'm like, uh-oh.
Better do some research. Google Melvin Gordon
Yeah. I
immediately.
mean, honestly, with the lack of preparation that I gave to the start of this season and the draft, and now I
Yeah.
guess sort of everything else, like I'm hardly even like I'm not looking at any advanced analytics. I'm just sort of working the phone app and then just trying to make decisions based on that, and it doesn't even give you all the stuff that you need to know.
No,
So
that's
it's like,
yeah. That's why I mean I'm fortunate enough that I sit at my desk at my job and I can just listen to fantasy football podcasts in the background. So that's what I do at work is basically studying to do my podcast and to do better in this league, but this week it didn't work. This was a super weird week, and I guess I'll share it on here. But I took a picture. It was like a stat, and it was like it showed this very solid lineup that you would think would be like amazing. Let me take a look. See if I can find it. I took a screenshot of it. Yeah, here it is. Okay, so this team you would think would do great. Matt Ryan as the quarterback, David Johnson, Kerryon Johnson, Kenny Galladay, Larry Fitzgerald, David Montgomery. Well, he's okay, but Evan Ingram, Green Bay's defense, and Brandon McManus would have totaled you 7.4 fantasy points.
see, that could be someone's team, like in real life.
I
Like,
know.
I'm sure
that's
there's somebody who's like, oh, it looks like I scored under 10.
Yeah, like this could be a really good team. Like Kenny Galladay's been really solid this year. David Johnson's been good when he's been healthy.
Mhm.
Like Green Bay's defense has been solid. The only weak point is David Montgomery, and he just sucks. But I traded for him, so hopefully he does better. He was part of
Yeah.
that George Kittle trade.
Oh, so yeah,
So
what was the Kittle trade again? Refresh my memory. It was
it
Kittle,
was,
Montgomery,
yeah,
Connor,
and
and
Woods.
Woods. Ah, that's
Yeah.
right.
I was trying to
Okay.
get out of the Rams wide receiving core mainly with that Woods trade, but I think I might have given up too much. I mainly just wanted Kittle.
See now, okay, so who? Okay, Courts had Kittle because that's his name.
Yeah.
So Courts now has. Does he have Cooks and Woods?
Yeah. So that's his
Oh,
weak point.
hmm.
Um, and that's why he scored so poorly this week. Well, he had McCaffrey on a bye,
Well, there you go.
and he also had Mike Evans on a bye, so
Hmm.
he was kind of weak at his position players this week. And then he had Matt Ryan who got hurt, and he had an awful game.
Do you ever look at the final standing projection that
I
ESPN gives
do,
you?
but I don't know. I know nothing. I don't believe it.
Yeah, I don't quite know how it works. I
I don't
mean,
either. Yeah. Like I mean, I'm sure it takes your current standings into account and like maybe how much your team has scored versus how much other people's teams have scored. I don't know. I really have no idea.
yeah.
So I've been looking at it, and every time that I see my team with like a little red arrow next to it, I'm like, it's wrong. But then when I look at it and it has the green arrow going way towards the front, I'm like, yeah, that's probably right. So it's
Well,
one of those things.
I was kind of a little bit startled by looking at Big Ben's bathroom. I was startled by Big Ben's bathroom, as I'm
Yeah,
sure many people have been.
right.
Yeah,
Always.
they're projected at number one.
Yeah. Well, I think that's mainly because he started at 5-0 and then he lost last week.
Yeah. So is that all
And
it takes? It's just like
I
going for
guess,
having a bad draft and then just keep winning. Is that?
I guess because yeah, he was projected at what, like 10? Yeah, he was
Yeah.
10 and went all the way to 1. But um I mentioned this, like he had the fewest points scored against by like over 100.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go.
Yeah, and it still is that way. Yeah, it's like by 100 points. He has 528 points against, and I have 623 points against, and I'm second least.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think that's kind of how it was for me last year. I was getting really lucky.
yeah, getting the
Um,
wins, even
yeah,
though you
just
weren't scoring that
getting
great.
close wins and then losing big. That's the
Yeah,
key.
it is. Yeah. Well, and then the only reason he's close in points scored this year is because last week he had 170. So,
Mm.
yeah, he put up a huge week. But, yeah, I don't know how that exactly works. But, yeah.
Oh yeah, do you know how standings are gonna like final standings are gonna affect draft order if they will at all?
No, that's a good question. And maybe we should decide on that.
Yeah,
Um,
because I mean you don't necessarily want the first pick either.
right. Not necessarily. And, um, or maybe you would because maybe some people are giving up their first round draft pick. And then, if the majority of the league is giving up their first round draft pick, the way we're going to have to figure out, we might have to do like a non-snake draft.
Mm.
I don't know. We're going to have to figure out the draft settings
Yeah, yeah.
because ESPN won't allow you to do what I want to do with the draft picks next year. So we might have to use like a third party
Hmm.
drafting, and then I can log it in to
Clickety
the
clack.
ESPN. Yeah, to the ESPN website from there. But there's definitely gonna have to be some figuring out, and I know I didn't quite figure it out all before the season started, and I know there was a little bit of an uprising.
Well,
But
I mean, you know, my uprising failed. Like,
yeah,
congratulations to you and Adam Stovall, honestly. Like, good for you two. You and your best man working behind closed doors.
you're right.
Classic fantasy football cronyism. It's
You're
just,
right.
ugh.
Well, I put a poll out there, and only 2 people voted for you. So it was, and you were one of them.
Whatever. I'm still gonna complain. Doesn't matter.
I know you will, but that's how they go. But
I mean, I'm not gonna let the facts get in the way of me like totally complaining about Adam nonstop.
hey, that's just how you gotta talk shit and complain, and that's what gives this league character.
Oh
So,
yeah, you're right. Gotta let him know.
all right, one more question for you. Uh, well, I know we kind of glanced on it slightly, but how do you feel about your team going forward? I know you kind of said meh, but
Oh,
expand
they're
on that.
kind of they're you know, so I don't think Russell Wilson is going to be this, he's not going to end as the QB1 for the season.
No, but I think he could be top 3.
Yeah, he could be. Running
Well,
backs, not thrilled with them.
yeah,
Receivers. I mean, look, my team would be a great team in Madden.
it would. You're right.
But well, also I have AJ Green coming back,
Yeah, you've been
and
hanging on to
that's
AJ Green. He's not
yeah,
gonna be back till week 10.
yeah. I mean, I'm just making all sorts of like bad decisions. Like this is not a good team right now, and it's probably not going to be a good team next year either. But whatever.
I think.
I mean,
Yeah.
I'm trying to like right now. I'm like, okay, well, I could maybe sneak into the playoffs if we
Yeah.
have continuous weeks like this week where everybody in my division loses except for me. I'm thinking about my keepers. I mean, even right now, it's not totally clear what I want to do. Does it make sense to even keep a tight end?
Yeah.
I don't know, man.
Well,
All I know is I can't get rid of Zerline because then I can't, my team name will.
you're right. And
It'll,
he's been a beast. He's been
yeah.
good this year. I don't know if he's not the kick. No, he's 5th, but he's been very solid, except for
Yeah.
last week, which was a shitty week overall for the Rams.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. So, I mean, I think Russell Wilson is going to be fantastic the rest of the year. Like, the thing about Russell, like, I think this is his floor. What you got this week was his floor.
Mm-hmm.
Because, what's great about Russell, it literally is his floor. He had one other week at exactly 14.3 points.
Mm.
But what's great about Russell Wilson is that he's running more now, and he's hyper efficient. So like he may not throw for 400 yards, but he'll throw for 4 touchdowns. So that's what makes it. He had some insane stat. It was like an 8% touchdown per pass ratio, or not ratio, but percentage. It's insane. And
8%.
like nobody else, yeah, and nobody else is within like 3%. Like the next person, or maybe 2%, he's the next person's at like 6 for all of last year. So
Jeez.
yeah, all the analysts were saying like there's no way he's gonna repeat that, and he is so far. So yeah, he's just a hyper efficient quarterback. Everybody was talking about how Tyler Lockett was gonna be, he wasn't gonna be as good as everybody thinks he will be, because he's not going to get all those touchdowns, those deep touchdowns. I think he had a perfect passer rating throwing to Tyler Lockett last year. So, yeah. But I think he'll help carry your team, and I think Juju will be a solid wide receiver 2 for you. I don't think he's going to be wide receiver 1 numbers like we thought he might be at the beginning of the year. But
yeah, it's a real shame.
Yeah.
I mean, I had the choice of. I mean, so I had the turnaround on the snake draft. I had 10 and 11.
Yeah.
And what did I do? I went Jones and then Juju.
Yeah.
And I was right. I was this close to getting Connor instead of Juju.
That's right. You mentioned that, and I don't know. You wouldn't be happy with Connor at this point either. So.
No, well, I mean, as a Steelers fan, I've been watching the games, Jason.
It's a rough season.
Yeah, this one is just like, no pressure, just sort of, just watching football just because I'm an addict, not because
not
I'm
because you're
expecting
hoping
anything.
for
It's just like it's just I have to watch it because I have a problem.
It's not a problem. No, it's a pastime. Your favorite pastime besides playing cello. All right, so who do I have next? Next week, week 8. Wait. Ooh, I'm playing courts this week. Yeah, and Christian McCaffrey is back, along with Mike Evans and the New England defense playing against Cleveland.
So also another fun fact, I'm pretty sure I had New England defense at first, and then I just dropped them.
Wait, did you really?
I want to say that's right.
Oh, let me take a look. Yeah, they were not. No, I don't know. I think the only transaction is him picking them up for $11 after the first week. Let me take a look.
So maybe I'm just like thinking of a nightmare or something.
That's a possibility. Yeah, that would be the stuff of the worst nightmares. That would be awful. Oh man, that'd be terrifying. All right, Patriots D. I'm going back into that. Yeah, the only transaction I can see is him picking them up off waivers. But that would be a terrifying dream. Also, Sony Michel currently has you 14 points.
Well, that's good.
He's got 26 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns.
See, that's what they were saying. They're saying like, oh yeah, he's like a touchdown guy.
He is. I mean, he was wrecking the last, at the end of the last year, like in the playoffs after he came back from his injury.
I was a believer.
He was going nuts. And it's kind of like he doesn't have the yardage this year. He just hasn't been efficient, but he's been getting them touchdowns. So, but yeah, I'm actually kind of terrified for my matchup next weekend. Who are you playing next?
Oh God, I don't know. I'm playing. What? Carry On? Is that who I'm playing?
Maybe.
No, I'm playing Team Auto Pick.
Oh, Team Auto Pick got James.
Yeah.
He's been not bad.
He's 3-3, and I think he won this week, so he's gonna be 4-3. Is that right?
Shoot, he's gonna be tied with me. Oh no.
Yep.
Yeah, he is. That's not good. But so I think I don't know if we ever solidified or if I ever said it, but I think we're gonna end up going with the top 2 in each league, and then the top 2 winning teams after that.
Yes. Well, that's how I remember. I remember arguing for the winner of the division and then whoever the next best teams are, regardless of division.
Like, win-loss record, not necessarily highest scoring. Right. I think that's what we decided. So I don't know if I was gonna go in and make it official on the ESPN website, but that's been in my mind for the past few weeks. So, so yeah, I think that's what we'll do.
Yeah, I do think having only 4 teams in the playoffs is the right thing.
Yeah, no, I think so too.
For sure.
Yeah, I mean you can't do 5 because that just kind of sucks.
Yeah.
So I think 4 is good. And it's not like the last 6 are not playing for anything. Like they can still win $10 each week if they're the highest scoring team. So at least that keeps them from being a Neil like last year, who won like he put up like super high scoring games in the playoff weeks, but he was not in the playoffs.
Yeah.
So that'll keep him from being so angry this year when he doesn't make the playoffs.
Yeah, I think it's a good way to do it. I mean, honestly, my whole goal for this season is just to win $10 back from my 50.
There you go. I mean,
I was telling Adam, like, my goal for the season is to only lose $40.
Wait, that might be in the cards this week. You might get your $10 back. Or 10 of your dollars back. Oh, you'll have to beat Adam, though.
Yeah, Adam and his 1-5 juggernaut.
Yeah. He has Philip Dorsett playing this week, and he also got a touchdown. So he's at 153. You're at 129. So Sony Michel really has to step up his game. Although he's probably going to be running the rest of the game because they're up 24-0. So you have potential, but
not for $10 though.
Yeah, maybe not. Well, you definitely got the W this week. You beat me down, unfortunately, for me. Fortunately for you, it was a much needed win for you.
For sure, this was a must win. It was This at least keeps me in the hunt.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to have an upset next week because otherwise I'm gonna be below 500 or at 500 again. So I gotta stay in that top 4 or else I'm out of here. So it's gonna be a fight. It's gonna be a fight for the playoffs.
Yeah, I don't know. I think my pick right now is probably Courts to take it all just because it is.
I know.
Courts is like he's like
the Patriots.
The fantasy football god's favorite son. He's like
He's like Tom Brady.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not fair.
Sucks.
He's been blessed.
Yeah. Well, thanks for being on my podcast. You know, you're the first guest on my podcast.
It is an honor, sir.
Yeah. How does it feel?
Pretty good. I'm glad that I didn't try to prepare anything.
That's good.
I'm glad that I just sort of started talking.
Yeah. Sometimes that's the best way to do it, and it's much easier to do that with somebody else, I found out. If it's just for me, I need something to talk off of.
And also, what kind of what I was thinking, I got a drink with a coworker afterward.
Yeah.
After work, and I'm like, well, I can't look up the shit I was gonna look up or whatever. And I'm like, wait a minute, Jason's already done this. He's done the work for me. That's why he's the guy with the podcast. So I can just refer to him if I don't know anything.
Yeah, I wrote down what I wanted to ask you and a few notes, and I just kind of went from there. And I had the fantasy podcast easily pulled up. So if there were any questions on anything, I could find it quickly. If only I could figure out Skype as quickly as I know the ESPN fantasy app.
Yeah.
But
I don't know, Skype. What is this? 2009?
Yeah, right. Or is that when it was popular? Probably. Yeah. Yeah, that's about right.
Well, there you have it. There was Benaiah and I talking all about last week's matchup and a little bit extra about the trade that Courts and I did, and just a slight preview into next week's matchup. So, all right, now matchup number 2. Try and stop me from auto picking versus Mix and Mac. Try and stop me from auto picking won 109 to 99.8. Team Auto Pick gets a solid game from the Rams defense and special teams to beat a struggling Mixon and Mac. Now, the studs from Try and Stop Me from Auto Picking. The Rams defense put up 22 fantasy points for him this week, and T.Y. Hilton put up 16.4 fantasy points for him this week. In the duds category, Pat Mahomes had 7.2 points. Mark Ingram had 5.8 points. Man, he's kind of been a disappointment recently. And everyone else just kind of had average games, but it was enough to win. So I guess you got to be happy enough that, your down games came with a big game from your defense to kind of pick you up a little bit. Now, Team Mix and Max studs. Lamar Jackson, 23.3 fantasy points. He ran for 116 yards and a touchdown. He's basically a running back one that also throws the ball 20 or 30 times a game. It's madness. This is madness. He also played Marvin Jones for some crazy reason, but, Marvin Jones put up 38.3 fantasy points. That was basically his whole team this week, were those two players. Everyone else did awful. They're all in the studs category. Gooses from Luke Wilson and Minnesota's defense. It was just a rough day for the rest of the team. They couldn't overcome, or the two studs couldn't overcome the rest of everybody else in that matchup. So, matchup number 3, Rogers Cup versus Brandon Cooks Kittlecorn. Rogers Cup wins 156.2 fantasy points to 75.6 points. Rogers Cup and his finally healthy monster team took down Brandon Cooks Kittlecorn, who was clearly missing CMC on a bye. Rogers Cup studs this week. Aaron Rodgers, 43.8 fantasy points. Big week. He also had Zeke put up 23.7 fantasy points on a big game versus a tough Philly defense. It's very surprising. Philadelphia's defense has been very good against running backs this year. So it was kind of interesting to see Zeke go off against them and not have a big game against, say, like the Packers or something like that. In the duds category for Rogers Cup, he had Brandon McManus, who put up -1 point. It was kind of the epitome of the crappy day that Denver had this week. So the studs on Brandon Cooks Kittlecorn's team, clearly the New England defense and special teams. Duh, Jason. That should have been... I should have a recording of that already set up and ready to go. They're the most reliable piece in Kortz's team outside of Christian McCaffrey. So they're basically a running back one themselves. Like, that defense has scored way too many fantasy points this year. And the duds from Brandon Cooks Kittlecorn, basically everybody else. His team only scored 75 points, so New England's defense had almost half of those. Nobody else had over 13 points, so including the quarterback. So it was just a rough day for Brandon Cooks Kittlecorn. Matchup number 4, Big Ben's Bathroom versus my tight end Ertz when I fart. Big Ben's Bathroom wins 95.2 to 80.7 fantasy points. Big Ben's Bathroom jumps back in the winning saddle with a win over my tight end Ertz when I fart. The studs for Big Ben's Bathroom, Jared Goff had 25.3 fantasy points. Here is what you learned from Jared Goff's big game against Atlanta, is that Atlanta's defense is essentially a cheat code for opposing quarterbacks. Start all and any QBs versus Atlanta. Even if they get negative points the previous week, which Jared Goff did. He had -1.5 points last week. And he comes out and puts up 25 points this week against Atlanta's defense. So, basically, I think they're playing against Seattle this week. So you're playing Russell Wilson anyways, but if you have Russell Wilson, start him. If you're playing Sam Darnold this week, play him if he was playing against Atlanta's defense. Like, it doesn't matter who it is. It could be Josh Allen. It could be Josh Allen. I'm thinking of Josh Rosen. It could be Josh Rosen, and he would put up over 20 fantasy points. So that's just how Atlanta's defense is. In the duds category for Big Ben's Bathroom, Kenny Galladay put up 2.6 fantasy points. He also had Green Bay's defense and special teams. He put up -3 fantasy points. That was a shootout. Oakland did a lot of passing to catch up, and they scored a lot of kind of garbage time work. So, my tight end Ertz when I furt. He didn't really have any studs this game. It was kind of disappointing. I think his best players were in the low teens. So it was not a good day. Not a good day for my tight end Ertz when I furt. So I was just gonna take a look. I wanted to double check this because I lied. He did not have 80 fantasy points. He had 78.7 fantasy points. So I screwed that up. I put 80. Deshaun Watson had 15.5 fantasy points, and that was his highest scorer of the day. The dud category, Calvin Ridley put up 5 points. It was all kind of like mediocre games. It wasn't anything too great. Oh, and Chicago's defense. Oh, I was doing this during the game, I believe. They had, or maybe they were credited with one less interception or fumble or something. Yeah, they were. It must have been a stat correction because I had them for 3 points, and they only had 1. So they must have had a stat correction after yesterday because that's when I did this. So I don't know. Matchup number 5, the Running Mayfields versus Carry On My Wayward Son. Oh man, I feel so bad for Carry On, and this might be the last week I get to do this because Carry On's probably going to be dropped. So I had to give it a little bit of flair. So Running Mayfields beat Carry On My Wayward Son 95.9 to 68.7. Matt Stafford and Austin Eckler do their part and almost outscore Carry On My Wayward Son by themselves. Running Mayfield studs. Clearly, I already said it. Matt Stafford and Austin Eckler. Matt Stafford put up 28.6 fantasy points. Austin Eckler put up 22 fantasy points. And he's just got way too much value on this offense. I'm not sure what's going on with Melvin Gordon, and we talked about it a little bit with Benaiah previously. He's concerned about Melvin Gordon since he is a Melvin Gordon owner. We all thought he was getting great value in like the 6th round or 7th round when he got him, or 5th round I think, but it's unfortunate that he didn't come back and take over. He's kind of done his work on volume, and he hasn't gotten that. So, in the duds category for Running Mayfields, the Chargers defense put up 1 point, and David Johnson put up 0.2 points. It's really unfortunate, the David Johnson situation. Hopefully he'll be back this week, but it sounds like he's still nursing some sort of ankle injury, so we'll have to wait and see. So for Team 2, Carry On My Wayward Sons. Studs. DeAndre Hopkins, obviously, finally bringing the big wide receiver 1 numbers we were looking for. And then the duds was basically the whole rest of the team. He only scored 68 fantasy points this week, so it was kind of a rough week for him. All right, so I already told you guys in the segment with Benaiah about the very viable sounding team that only scored 7.4 fantasy points this week. Now, let's go on the other side of this and go to the waiver wire team that could potentially kick all of our asses. The quarterback would be Kirk Cousins with 29.2 fantasy points. Running back 1, Chase Edmonds with 34 fantasy points. CJ Ham, running back 2. In case you don't know who he is a running back, the 3rd string running back for the Vikings. He had a touchdown, so he had 7.9 fantasy points. Clearly, there was nobody else on the waiver wire in the running back category that did anything this week because 7.9 was the second highest points on the waiver wire. For the wide receiver position, Zach Pascal had 25.6 points, and Alex Erickson of the Bengals had 17.5 fantasy points. Eric Ebron at the tight end position had 15 points, and in the flex, Corey Davis was 17 points. The defense is the Kansas City Chiefs with 23 fantasy points, and Steven Hauschka is the kicker with 13 points. Now, this team would have scored you 182.2 points. There has not been 1 week yet where the waiver wire team would not beat. There have been close calls, but they've beat the highest scorer every single week. Now, for my matchup predictions for next week. I was in this previous week, 3 for 5. I'm getting better and better each week. After my start, I had 3 for 5 the very first week, and then I went 2 for 5, then 1 for 5, and then 2 for 5, and now I'm back up to 3 for 5. So hopefully this keeps going, and I ride this to victory and go 4 for 5 or 5 for 5 this week. That's the goal. Matchup number 1, Scary Terry's versus Brandon Cook's Kittlecorn. The projected winner is Scary Terry's. George Kittle will lead the Scary Terry's forces to destroy his former team in a revenge game versus Brandon Cook's Kittlecorn, because he has yet to change his name. Matchup number 2, Try and Stop Me from Auto-Picking versus Zerline, I Never Hit You, I Did Not. The projected winner, Zerline, I Never Hit You. Without Mahomes and Mark Ingram, Team Autopick is going to have a tough time and lose to a monster game by Juju against Miami, and the rest of Zerline, I Never Hit You. Matchup number 3, Rogers Cup versus My Tight End Hurts When I Fart. The projected winner, Rogers Cup. He's going to start a cascade of wins with his healthy lineup despite a bye week from Zeke. Matchup number 4, Big Ben's Bathroom versus the Running Mayfields. The projected winner is Big Ben's Bathroom. Michael Thomas and a renewed Jared Goff will beat the Running Mayfields due to a bye week from Mark Andrews and David Johnson sitting out the week due to injury. Matchup number 5, Carry On My Wayward Son. Carry on my wayward son. Versus Mix and Mac. Projected winner, Carry On My Wayward Son will take advantage of a bye week from Lamar Jackson to beat down Mix and Mac. Well, I didn't get any questions from you guys, so that is the end of episode number 7. So thank you guys for listening. Good luck this week to you, Gooshbagz. Goodbye.